The desert town of Volcar Prime was hot, dry, and full of danger. Broken ships, strange aliens, and dirty streets filled the planet's edge. Here, humans were rare and weak, but Drew didn't care. He was a young human mechanic. He wore a dirty jacket, had a cut on his cheek, and grease on his hands. His job? Fix old ships, clean engines, and make broken things fly again. That night, Drew sat in a loud alien bar drinking green juice from a cracked glass. Around him, tall aliens with sharp teeth laughed and shouted. Most didn't even notice the small human sitting at the corner table. But Drew made them notice. He stood up on his chair and shouted with a smile, "You know what? I'll marry the ugliest woman in the galaxy if it means I don't die alone." The whole bar went silent. Then, heavy footsteps. Thump, thump, thump. Everyone turned. A huge shadow stood by the door. 4 arms, red skin, black armor, and glowing yellow eyes. General Qatar. He was not just any alien. He was the warlord of this region. A living legend. A killer in battle. His name was spoken in fear. Qatar stepped forward. His voice was deep like thunder. "You say you'll marry the ugliest?" he asked, grinning. Drew swallowed. Just a joke." Qatar's grin grew wider. "I have a daughter. She's feared across 3 systems for her face. Want hair?" The bar exploded in laughter, but Qatar raised one hand and silence returned. "Beat me in combat," he said, "and you can have her." Drew blinked. "What?" "Simple deal, human," Qatar said. "You win. You marry my daughter." "You lose. Well, you won't need to worry about marriage again." Everyone laughed harder, but Drew's heart raced. Was this real? A death match? Over a stupid joke? Qatar leaned closer. "Tomorrow, dawn, arena." Drew looked around. Eyes watched him like he was already dead. Some aliens placed bets on screens. Others whispered, "Poor human." Still, Drew didn't back down. He took a deep breath and nodded. "All right, I'll be there." Qatar nodded once and walked out. The bar came alive again, but this time everyone talked about the crazy human who just signed his death wish. Drew sat back down. His hands shook. He didn't know how to fight. He wasn't a soldier. He fixed engines. Why did he say yes? Outside, far from the town, in a cold, dark fortress, someone else was watching. Raka, Qatar's daughter. She stood in a room filled with old weapons. Her face was hidden behind a cracked mask. Her red skin shimmered under moonlight. She had scars on her arms. Long, deep scars. She had heard everything, and she was not happy. "Ugliest?" she whispered to herself. "Another fool who thinks beauty is skin only." She picked up a long blade from the table and swung it with force. The air split with a sharp sound. She had beaten 10 soldiers in combat. She had burned her own scars into her skin as a sign of strength. But still, the world called her ugly. Tomorrow, she thought, another one will try, but this one is human. She looked out her window, toward the lights of the town, and whispered, "Let's see what you're made of." Joke boy. The twin suns of Volcar Prime rose slowly, painting the sky red and gold. The wind carried sand and dust across the open plains, but the people didn't stay home. They marched to the arena, big, round, ancient, made from black stone and metal bones of old ships. This was where warriors fought for glory, or died for it. Today the crowd came for one reason, to watch a human die. Drew stood inside the preparation room. His heart thumped like a hammer. He wore a simple shirt, light armor on his chest, and no helmet. A broken shield leaned against the wall. Beside him was a metal staff, long and cold. He had no training, no plan. Just one truth. He said yes, and now he had to survive. The gate opened with a loud grinding sound. The crowd roared. Drew walked out. Alien eyes stared from every corner. Some wore cloaks. Some had metal faces. Some had claws. Some held flags with Qatar's face on them. Then the other gate opened. Qatar stepped into the arena. His body armor was thick. 4 strong arms held 2 axes and 2 blades. His eyes glowed yellow. His teeth shined. He looked like a god of war. Drew held his staff tightly. Qatar pointed at him and shouted, "You made a joke. Now let's see if you laugh when your bones break." The crowd cheered. Drew didn't move. The announcer, a 3-eyed alien in gold, shouted, "Begin!" Qatar charged. Fast, too fast. Drew barely jumped aside. The axe missed his head by an inch. Sparks flew as metal hit stone. The ground shook. Qatar turned and swung again. Drew raised his staff. Crack, the staff snapped in two. His arm went numb. He rolled away, coughing from dust. The crowd laughed. Drew's back hit the wall. He was trapped. Qatar grinned. This is too easy. He lifted his blade, but Drew was already reaching into his boot. Click. His fingers found a small metal pin, an emergency gadget he once made to power dead engines. He threw it at the ground. Boom! A flash of light. Loud noise, smoke. Qatar staggered back, blinded for a second. Drew grabbed a piece of his broken staff and charged, not with power, but with aim. He jabbed the tip into Qatar's foot joint. The warrior roared in pain. Drew ducked, rolled behind him, and kicked the back of his knee. Qatar dropped one leg, another jab, another roar. Drew grabbed the side of the giant's armor and pressed another pin, this one. Electric zap. Qatar shook violently. His top two arms went numb. The crowd gasped. Drew jumped back, panting. Blood ran down his cheek. He couldn't feel his fingers. But he stood, Qatar heavy and angry. Tried to rise but slipped on the metal dust and fell flat on his back. The arena went silent. The dust settled. Qatar didn't move. Drew raised his hand, breathing hard. I'm not strong, but I'm smart. For a second, no one spoke. Then, roar of shock, cheers, screams. The crowd erupted. The announcer's voice cracked with disbelief. Winner, the human. Drew of Earth! Qatar's body twitched. He groaned, then laughed, a slow, deep laugh that shook the arena. He stood slowly, wiped blood from his lip, and walked toward Drew. Drew flinched, but Qatar didn't attack. Instead, he raised one hand in respect. You beat me, he said, not with muscles, with mind. That counts, Drew nodded, still breathing hard. So, does this mean I meet your daughter? Qatar grinned wide. Yes, but don't smile yet, boy. The real test starts now. Before Drew could ask what that meant, Qatar whispered, She's not what you think. The gates opened again. Qatar walked out, 2 guards following him. Drew stood alone in the center, surrounded by aliens who now saw him differently. Not weak, not a joke, but something more. Yet far away in a quiet tower, Reka watched the entire fight on a glowing screen. Her eyes narrowed. He got lucky, she said. Then she smiled, slow and sharp. Let's see if luck helps him survive me. The night after the battle was cold and quiet. Drew sat alone in a metal room deep inside the fortress of Qatar. His body ached. His arm was wrapped in bandages. His lips were dry. Yet he was alive. He had beaten a 4-armed warlord. No one could believe it. Not even him. A heavy metal door slid open with a hiss. 2 alien guards stepped inside. Their skin was dark blue, their eyes glowing green. General Qatar requests your presence, one said. Drew stood slowly. His legs trembled from pain. Now? The guard grunted. Now. They led him through long halls carved from black rock. The air smelled of oil and smoke. Strange alien torches burned on the walls, glowing in purple fire. At last, they stopped before 2 giant doors. The guards opened them and Drew stepped inside. The room was large and silent. Red banners hung from the ceiling. On the far end stood Qatar, his massive form half hidden in shadow. But beside him, someone else stood, a woman, tall, strong, 4 arms like her father, but slimmer. She wore dark armor that fit her shape perfectly. Her face was covered by a cracked silver mask. Only her eyes were visible, bright, sharp, and dangerous. This, Qatar said, his deep voice echoing, is my daughter Raka. Drew tried to smile, but she didn't move. Didn't bow. Didn't speak, Qatar chuckled. You wanted to meet the ugliest, didn't you, human? Raka stepped forward. Her voice was soft, but every word carried power. Ugly is what weak minds call what they fear. Her words hit Drew like a blade. Qatar laughed again, proud. She has spirit like me. But I must warn you, boy. No man has ever lasted 10 seconds against her in combat. Even I no longer test her strength, Drew blinked. Wait, combat? Raka pulled 2 short swords from her back. The sound of steel echoed through the room. You defeated my father, she said, but you did not earn me. You must face me, not to win me, but to prove who you really are. Drew sighed, half smiling. Great, another death match. Qatar laughed loudly and left the room, his voice fading down the corridor. Don't die too fast, human. I just repaired the floor. The door slammed shut. Drew and Raka were alone. Raka's eyes glowed faintly through her mask. Take a weapon. Drew looked around and saw a spear on the wall. He grabbed it slowly, holding it tight. I don't want to hurt you. She tilted her head. You won't. Then she moved fast. Her first strike nearly cut the air beside his face. Drew jumped back, his heart racing. The spear felt heavy in his hands. She attacked again, 2 blades flashing like light. Drew blocked one, stumbled, then rolled under the second. Raka's movement was like a dance, smooth, deadly, graceful. Her eyes never blinked. Drew swung his spear not to hit her, but to create distance. He spoke between breaths. Why are you doing this? To see your truth, she said coldly. Everyone hides behind words. You show who you are when you fight. She rushed again. This time Drew didn't back away. He stepped forward. Her blades crossed near his neck, but he dropped his spear and used his hands. He caught her lower wrist and twisted. She gasped softly. He pushed her back just enough to grab her mask. The silver mask slipped off and fell to the floor. The sound echoed through the chamber. For a moment, both stood frozen. Raka's face was revealed. She was beautiful and scarred. One side of her face was burned, dark lines running from her cheek to her neck. But her eyes were bright, full of fire and pain. Drew stared. Not in fear, not in disgust, just silence. Then he said quietly, You're not ugly. Raka stepped back, her swords lowering. For the first time, her voice softened. You should fear me, he shook his head. You're stronger than fear. She stared at him for a long moment. The tension in the air faded. Then she turned, picked up her mask, and walked away. At the door she paused. Rest, human. Tomorrow I will teach you what true strength is. The door closed behind her. Drew sank to his knees, breathing hard. His hands were still shaking, but not from fear, from curiosity. Who was this woman behind the scars? Why did her eyes look so sad? Outside the chamber, Raka stopped in the hallway, touching her cheek gently. For the first time in years, someone had looked at her and hadn't looked away. The next morning, Drew woke to the sound of metal slamming against metal. His bones ached. His back felt like it had been smashed by a shuttle. Every part of him screamed for rest, but the door to his room slid open and Raka stood there, no words, just a look, and Drew knew training had begun, followed her silently to the outer cliffs behind the fortress. A wide, flat space sat under the burning twin suns. Old machines lay broken nearby. Strange marks were carved deep into the rocks, scars from past battles. Raka stood at the center. You want to live here? She said, cold and sharp. You want respect? Then you will learn. Drew smiled weakly. Good morning to you too. She threw a heavy sword at his feet. Pick it up. He bent, struggled to lift it. It was twice the weight of any tool he'd ever used. His arms shook just holding it. Raka didn't wait. She charged. Her attacks were fast, brutal. Not like last night. She wasn't holding back now. Drew blocked the first 2 strikes, stumbled on the third, and dropped to his knees on the fourth. Dust flew. Raka stopped, staring down at him. Again, and so it went. For hours, strike, block, fall, stand, swing, fail, over and over again. She made him run through fire rings, crawl under sharp wires, hold his breath underwater, and climb walls without ropes. When Drew collapsed, she said nothing. When he threw up from exhaustion, she didn't blink. Why are you doing this? He gasped once, lying on the hot stone floor. Raka answered without looking at him. Because pain removes lies. Strength removes fear. I want to see who you really are when there's nothing left. Drew laughed weakly. You sure know how to flirt. She didn't laugh. But she didn't hit him either. That night, Drew sat near a small fire. His hands were wrapped in cloth. His lip was cut. But he was smiling. Raka sat across from him, sharpening her blade. Her face was bare now. The scars didn't bother Drew anymore. I met a lot of aliens, Drew said, but none trained me like a beast. Raka looked up. That's because none of them saw what I see. He raised a brow. What do you see? She looked at him for a long time, then spoke softly. You're weak, but not in the way others are. You don't fear pain. You fear being small. You fear being nothing. Drew's smile faded. She was right. He had always been the nobody in every room, the human with dirty hands fixing ships no one cared about. You fight like a rat, she added, but rats live when others die. He nodded. I'll take that as a compliment. Raka stood and tossed him a small fruit from her belt. Eat. Tomorrow we train with real blades. He caught it and stared at her. You enjoy this, don't you? Her eyes narrowed. It's the only time I feel alive. The next day she tested not just his body but his mind. Fix this, she said, dropping a broken alien weapon at his feet. Drew blinked. This is a plasma hook launcher. It's outlawed, she folded her arms. Fix it with no tools, he grinned. Now you're speaking my language. He sat for hours using scraps, wires from his boot, and a sharp rock to reshape the broken piece. Sweat dripped from his face. His fingers bled from the sharp edges, but he did it. When the launcher clicked to life and fired a hook across the cliff wall, Raka smiled, a real smile. You're more than just a mouth, she said. Thanks, he said. You're not as scary as you look either. She threw a small stone at his head. He ducked. Later that night, the two sat near the cliffs watching the twin moons rise. Raka looked at the sky. You still want to marry the ugliest in the galaxy? Drew looked at her, serious now. I never cared about the face. Only the fire inside. She turned to him, eyes glowing softly. No one's ever said that to me. He shrugged. Maybe no one ever looked long enough. Silence hung between them, not cold, not awkward, just real. And in that silence something began to grow. Not love yet, but respect. The sky over Volcar Prime turned black as storm clouds rolled in from the mountains. Lightning flashed. Thunder cracked like giant drums. Inside the fortress everything was quiet. Too quiet. Drew stood near a round window staring at the dark horizon. His arms were sore. His hands were still bandaged from training. But his mind was calm. Raka had not spoken to him all day. She was somewhere deep in the fortress, called by her father to meet the war. Council. Drew didn't like the sound of that. He turned to leave the room. When the door suddenly opened, Raka stepped in. Her face was hard, cold. Her eyes burned like fire. Something was wrong. Did I mess up? Drew asked, trying to lighten the mood. Raka didn't answer. She walked past him, dropped a scroll onto the table, and spoke flatly. The council has spoken. Drew picked up the scroll. The alien symbols were glowing red. What is this? He asked. A death order, she replied. Drew blinked. For who? Raka looked at him. You. Silence. Drew let the scroll fall from his fingers. They want you dead, she continued. They say you're a disease in our bloodline. A joke in our history. Drew sat down slowly. So that's it, huh? Raka didn't move. I'm sorry, he said. I didn't mean to cause this. You didn't, she replied. He looked up at her. Then why do they care so much? Because, she said, stepping closer. You didn't just survive. You changed something. You made me hesitate. You made my father laugh. You made others curious. Drew rubbed his face. So curiosity is a crime now? Raka knelt beside him. Her voice dropped to a whisper. They will send assassins tonight. Elite killers, no noise. No warnings. Drew chuckled weakly. Well, that's comforting. She gripped his shoulder. Leave now, I can cover you. He stared into her eyes. No, what? I'm not running, he said. I ran my whole life. From people. From fights. From my own shadow. Not this time. Raka stood up. Then you'll die. Maybe, he said, smiling sadly. But not without a good fight. She turned her back to him, silent for a moment, then said, Then I will fight too. Drew blinked. Wait, what? Raka looked over her shoulder. You think I trained you just to watch you die? I don't care what the council says. Tonight, they will learn that I choose my own path. The night deepened. The fortress went dark. Only the wind moved. Then, they came. 3 black shadows entered silently through the upper windows. Their bodies were slim, wrapped in stealth armor. No sound, no mercy. One moved toward Drew's room. Another moved toward Raka's chambers. The third slipped into the hallway with blades in both hands. But this time, Drew was ready. He had set up traps, small gadgets, wires, and smoke bombs. The moment the assassin opened his door, a flash exploded. Drew rolled out of bed, tackled the figure, and jammed a spike into the enemy's leg. The assassin screamed. First one down. The second came for Raka. She was already waiting, blades drawn. The fight was fast and brutal. Steel against steel. Sparks flew. Raka took a cut to her arm but sliced the assassin's throat before he could blink. Second one down. The third spotted Drew running through the hall and leaped from the shadows. Drew fell backward, but Raka jumped in, throwing her blade with perfect aim. It pierced the assassin's side. He fell. Third one down, breathing hard, Raka turned to Drew. "You okay?" He nodded, panting. "Still alive." She helped him stand. Outside, guards arrived too late. The attackers were already dead. Qatar entered moments later, his eyes scanning the room, then locking on the bodies. He said nothing, just stared at Drew. Then he looked at Raka. "So, you've made your choice." She stood tall. "Yes." Qatar walked forward slowly, then said, "Good." Drew blinked. "Wait, what?" Qatar smiled. "I wanted to see if she would protect you, if she would defy the council, if you would stand your ground." "Now I know." Raka narrowed her eyes. "You knew they were coming?" Qatar nodded. "I let them come," Drew groaned. "You really are a monster." Qatar laughed. "I'm a father." He looked at both of them. "The council will not stop, but now they will fear you." The sun rose over Volcar Prime with a strange calm. No war horns, no battle drums, just silence. Inside the main hall of the fortress, Drew stood before Qatar once more, but this time, he wasn't holding a weapon. He wore a simple cloak, dusty boots, and tired eyes. Raka stood beside him, arms folded, her expression unreadable. Qatar looked down at the human, his forearms crossed, his face stern. "You have fought," the general said. "You have bled. You have survived death, but now comes the final test." Drew raised an eyebrow. "What, another duel?" Qatar shook his head. "No swords, no pain. Just truth." Raka tilted her head. "Truth?" Qatar stepped closer. "Why are you still here, human? What do you really want? Do you seek power, fame, or are you just playing a game for attention?" Drew blinked. "You're serious?" "I am," Qatar said. "Because if you lie now, I will kill you myself." The room went cold. Drew looked at Raka. Then he looked down at his own hands, burnt, scarred, calloused. The hands of someone who never had much in life but kept going anyway. He took a deep breath. "When I first joked in that bar," Drew began, "I didn't care who heard me. I didn't care if I looked like a fool. I just wanted someone to see me, to know I existed." He glanced at Qatar. "But then you challenged me, and everything changed. I saw how your people live, by strength, by rules, by tradition." He looked at Raka now. "And then I met her." Raka didn't blink. Drew stepped forward. "She's the strongest person I've ever met. Not because of her blades or training, but because she never gave up on herself even when everyone else did. She could have crushed me. She didn't. Instead, she taught me, tested me, respected me." He paused. "I didn't stay for power. I didn't fight for a crown. I stayed because I didn't want to walk away from something real." Silence. Raka's eyes softened, but she said nothing. Qatar stared at Drew for a long time. Then, slowly, the warrior king uncrossed his arms. "Words are easy," he said, "but your eyes speak truth." Qatar turned to Raka. "And you? What do you want?" Raka looked at Drew, then at her father. "I want to choose for myself," she said. "No council, no rules, no blood price, just my own will." Qatar nodded once. "Then so be it." From his belt he pulled a small ceremonial blade, short, gold, with alien symbols etched deep. He handed it to Drew. "This is the blade of Vaktan," he said. "It's not for killing. It's for choosing." Drew held it carefully. "What do I do with it?" Qatar smiled. "Place it on the stone if your answer is no. Hand it to her if it's yes." Drew turned to Raka. She waited, eyes calm, face open, scars uncovered. He didn't hesitate. He walked to her and placed the blade in her hand. She held it tightly. Then, to everyone's surprise, she stepped forward and pressed the blade flat against his chest, not to harm, to mark. The blade burned softly, and a golden symbol glowed on his shirt. "A warrior's choice," she said, "and mine too." The hall echoed with strange music, low and deep like drums underwater. Guards came forward. Council members watched from above, but none spoke. Qatar raised his hand. "This human is now protected by the House of Qatar," he declared. He is no longer a guest. He is no longer prey. He is family. Drew let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Raka looked at him. Still think I'm the ugliest in the galaxy? Drew laughed. Not even close. Qatar roared with laughter. Careful, boy. You still have a wedding to survive. That night under the glowing twin moons, Drew stood outside the fortress alone. He looked up at the stars, from a forgotten mechanic to a warrior's choice. He didn't know where this road would lead next, but for once in his life, he didn't feel small. He felt seen. Behind him, Ryaka stepped out silently and stood beside him. No more tests, she said. No more running, he replied. And together, they watched the stars. The news spread across the stars like wildfire. Qatar's daughter chooses a human. The warrior bride of Volcar Prime. Alien princess marries the weakest species. Across systems, people laughed. Some were shocked. Others were angry. But in the fortress of Qatar, no one cared about opinions. Inside the great hall, the walls were decorated with glowing firestones. Warriors, engineers, hunters, and even council members stood in silence as Raka stepped forward. Her face was uncovered. No veil, no mask, only her scars and her strength. She wore ceremonial armor, black with silver markings of her clan. In one hand, she held the blade of Voktan. In the other, she held Drew's hand. Drew, wearing simple robes, looked nervous but calm. His hair was brushed. His bandaged fingers still carried grease stains. He was not a prince. He was not a soldier, but he had earned this place. Qatar stood tall, pride shining in his yellow eyes. He spoke loud for all to hear. Let it be known, this is not a marriage of kingdoms or politics. This is a union of two warriors, one born of fire, one born of dust, and both unbreakable. Raka placed the blade on Drew's shoulder. Drew smiled. Still not stabbing me, huh? She smirked. Not today, the room echoed with laughter. Even the council members couldn't hide their surprise, but peace never lasts long. Hours after the ceremony, a message arrived. A hologram blinked to life in the war chamber. An alien noble from the Gorath Dominion appeared, tall, pale, and wearing rich robes. You insult us, the noble growled. A human joins your bloodline? This weak creature? This is dishonor to your warriors, Qatar grinned. You have a problem? Come say it to my face, the noble sneered. We'll come, all right, with ships. Raka was promised to one of our own. You broke a pact. The screen went black. The room was silent. Raka spoke first. Let them come. 3 days later, Gorath ships entered Volcar space. Huge, armored, 20 in total. But the fortress was ready. Qatar's warriors stood armed. Defense systems powered up. Drew worked with the engineers to patch shield lines and weapon turrets, but deep down, Drew knew. This wasn't about war. This was about her. Raka stepped onto the landing platform as a ship docked. A noble from Gorath exited with armored guards. His eyes landed on Drew and he laughed. This is the man, the noble said. This toy? Drew didn't speak. Raka stepped between them. Say another word, she warned, and I'll feed your tongue to the storm dogs. The noble raised a hand. You were promised to my nephew. Your scars made you a secret. Now you shame us all. Raka didn't blink. Your nephew never had the courage to face me in combat. This human did. Drew stepped forward. You want to fight? I've got a few bruises left to spare, the noble snarled. This is not over. He turned and left. Raka whispered to Drew. He won't attack. Not now. Not with every warrior watching. Later that night, Drew stood beside Raka on the fortress balcony. The sky above was clear. Stars lit the darkness. Do you regret it? He asked her quietly. Regret what? She replied, choosing me. Raka didn't answer right away. Then she said, when I was young, the council called me cursed. Children were told not to look at my face. Warriors refused to train me. I wore a mask so the world would stop staring. Drew looked at her gently. She continued, but then you saw me. Really saw me. Not as a monster. Not as a prize, just as me. She turned to him. You didn't save me, Drew. You fought beside me. You earned my respect. And maybe my heart, he smiled. Well, I did say I'd marry the ugliest in the galaxy. She rolled her eyes. You really want to die, don't you? They both laughed, and under the stars of Volcar Prime they stood side by side. Not as a joke, not as a legend, but as a team, the galaxy never forgot. They whispered stories for years. He joked he'd marry the ugliest, but found the strongest heart instead.